Good morning, my beautiful people. Today we are going to talk about the Populist Revolt, 1880 to 1896. It's a fancy way of saying there's a lot of really mad farmers. We got to talk about why they're mad, what that led to, and why that kind of changed America. So it was an important movement, this populist movement of the late 1800s. All right, so what's going on with farmers? Why are they angry? Because all of it starts with angry farmers. The farmers are angry because, well, farming is just getting too easy. You would think farmers would be doing really well at this time. You've got cities growing tremendously, so a lot of people who were farmers are moving to cities. You've got huge number of immigrants moving to America because the industry's growing, and you would think, well, they'll need food, so demand is going up, so everything's good. The problem with that is there are so many people moving out to the plains and using two new technologies, the fertilizer, which is becoming available, and more importantly, mechanizing their farming. In other words, you're growing wheat out in Kansas, you don't need 100 guys walking through the field with a big scythe cutting down wheat. You just buy a McCormick Reaper, hook it to your mule, they don't have tractors quite yet, and pull this machine through the field, and it cuts down the wheat, and it saves a lot of labor, which means you need less farmers. Or it also means you could plant more acreage. And that's what's going to happen. You got a lot more farmers that are being successful growing a whole lot more wheat. So the demand has gone up, but the supply has gone up even further. So as supply goes up and demand stays relatively the same, what happens with prices? Well, prices are going to drop dramatically. So they're making more than they ever have and making less than they ever have as far as money that they're making. And a lot of farmers are having to leave. Their farms are going bankrupt and they're going out to the cities to try to find work. They're very bitter about this. And even the ones that are left see how poor their farm is doing economically. They had to borrow money, usually against their farm, to buy this new equipment that now, because everybody has it, they have to buy it too, even if they didn't want to. And now everybody's being successful with it. And so, I can't pay back the loan. And the loan I borrowed is worth, the money I'm paying it back with is actually worth a lot more than the money I borrowed. The buying power has gone up because of some financial things. Well, the Civil War's just ended. During the Civil War, there was something called greenbacks that were put into circulation, very similar to today's money, and they're pulling those out. So they're actually shrinking the supply of money in the country. All right. That was bad. It wasn't allowing for inflation of prices, especially farm goods. Now, other things were going up in price, but farm goods were one thing that it was going down in price. And they saw that as one of the reasons it wasn't being allowed to expand. Another problem, so the banks have kind of got them. They're paying back loans with money that's worth a whole lot more than they borrowed. They also are out west. Now, 100 years before this, the people outside the cities were growing food and carrying it to the cities. Maybe it's 10 miles, maybe it's 5 miles into the city, and then they sell their goods. That's not the agricultural system we now have. That farm good from Kansas or Iowa may have to travel almost 2,000 miles to a big city to then be consumed by the people eating it. The farmer can't move it that far themselves. It's just impossible. So what are they relying upon? They're relying upon a railroad to move it. There usually is only one railroad coming to your town. So who do you have to sell to? The railroad. The railroad has a monopoly on transporting your goods. You either sell it to the railroad or you don't, and they're not wanting to pay a lot. We've got farmers all up and down this railroad. There's plenty of supply. we're not going to pay you much. So they also see the fact that the railroad is kind of whatever little profit they might have gotten is being eaten up by the railroad. They don't appreciate that. So they're fighting the banks, they're fighting the railroads, and they're fighting each other in prices. And they start this Granger movement, where originally we're just going to get together and talk about, okay, how can we produce more food, crops? We're going to socialize. We may even bring our wives into these meetings. They would often come from miles and miles around to have these Granger meetings. And get picnics, concerts, lectures. And it was nice for people. They got to, not be as isolated, come together. And this is kind of the seed that is going to become the Farmers Alliance. Some of these Granges actually start the fight against railroads, where they get some of their states to pass laws, either basically to regulate how much railroads could charge. The problem with that is immediately the railroad owners would sue, it would go to federal court, and because that railroad goes between states, that has to be regulated by Congress. It can't be regulated by the states, so these laws are going to be declared unconstitutional. That's just the way the Constitution is written. That power is, and Congress isn't doing anything about this. They don't want it because most of the people that are eating are getting very cheap food out east. That's where most of the representatives are from. So we're not going to change it as a nation and help the farmers out. They tried in the states. That's not really going to work. They also tried these cooperatives. Cooperatives still are around. Basically, it's we're going to run a business not for profit. So we're not going to have a store that makes a profit on us selling us stuff we need, seed, fertilizer, whatever a farmer would need. We'll simply set up a company ourselves in town, and we'll just sell stuff to the farmers at cost. The problem with that is the railroads quickly realized this is what was happening and said, well, if that business isn't going to take a profit, then we'll just charge you more. So it isn't that successful. The other problem with it is they're often mismanaged because there's no profit motive. So why work very hard to do anything? Today they work a little differently. My dad works with the co-op some and buys stuff with the co-op, and they'll send him a check. They'll get a profit during the year, but at the end of the year, they will send a certain percentage of that profit back to the farmers so that they are sure that they can pay for that kind of stuff. All right. After the Granger laws is kind of falling apart, you have something called the Farmers Alliance. This is still trying to fight the railroads, but these farmers are starting to grow a little more sophisticated political system to go and ask states for help. The problem with it is it never got united into one thing. It was just a bunch of farmer alliances. So in an area you had the farmer alliances. And they even tried to unite them. The problem was the farmer alliances in the West wouldn't work with the farmer alliances in the South that had African Americans. So there was basically different groups of them because it couldn't overcome the racial differences in the South between the black farmer alliances and the whites. However, they do spark a party, and that is the Populist Party. It's a direct successor to the Farmers Alliance, and it is going to run candidates and take over state governments in several western states, and even run a man for president several times. They got quite a few votes. The main thing that populists are known for is their fight against the gold standard. All right, let's talk about money and monetary policy for a minute. Try not to go to sleep. How much is this worth? Well, it's worth $100, Mr. Meyer. That's right, it's worth $100. How do we know? Well, it has 100 written on it. Well, so does my monopoly money. Why is this worth $100? Because the United States of America has said it's worth $100. I know it's surprising that one of these still exists in my wallet this time of the month. My wife usually gets them. Well, why is it worth $100? How does it say? Right under United States right here, very, very small lettering I can't get to show up here. It says something. It says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. It's on a dollar bill, it's on a $5 bill, it's on all our money today. There is a law that basically says you have to take it. If somebody owes you $100 and they try to pay you with a $100 bill and you won't take it, they don't owe you the money anymore. So you'll take it. And you'll have confidence in that that $100 bill, because you know everybody else in the country, and it only applies to our country, will take it. Now that is so well respected, it is often, our money is credited in other places in the world and is used by a lot of countries because it has some power behind it. Now, what was the money back then? Well, like I said, there were certain bills that were just like this. The original greenbacks that we had in the Civil War were kind of like this. It's money, trust us. That's what the government said. But most money wasn't that way. It was actually backed by gold. We only could print as much $100 bills, $5 bills, $1 bills as we had gold to change it into. So if we had $100 worth of gold, we could print up $100. If we had $20 billion worth of gold, that's how much money could be in circulation, which kind of restricts how much the economy can grow because it bumps up against the actual amount of gold that we have. Gold's a very rare element, so we don't have a lot of it in the world. That limits how much money can grow. It gets, especially as fast as our economy is growing, it gets stuck. We can't grow any faster. Now, the farmers blame this fact that our money is backed by gold, especially after they pull out the greenbacks. And by the way, they did that during the Civil War because they needed the economy to grow faster to pay for the war. War's over, we don't need that, but the economy's still growing really fast. We're going to blame that fact, the gold standard, on the fact that prices won't seem to grow when we're dealing with food products. So the farmer's idea was basically, we'll go to the bimetal standard. We'll have money, not like the greenbacks, not exactly that radical. We will have money, and the money we have today, we will have money based on not just gold, but silver. There was a lot of silver being discovered in America at the time. Now later we'll find a lot of gold, but at the time, silver is this booming thing in the West. We've got silver. It's precious. Back the money with gold and silver. That would allow the money supply to expand. It also would allow inflation, which was good for the farmers. The problem is it wouldn't really be good for the industrial workers to see their prices on stuff they bought go up. So they're never going to get the Eastern workers on board. They're going to try, and this is one of the big failures of the Populist Party. There's some other problems with this, but this was their big idea, bimetallism. Going to back the money by two precious metals instead of just one. Well, they're going to really get excited when the Depression hits in 1893. One of them even comes up with an interesting idea. He's from Ohio. His name's James Coxey, and he decides the federal government needs to get us out of this depression, spend $500 million on road building and railroad building, and get all these people back to work and get us out of this depression. They didn't do that, but later, Coxey actually gets to see this in his lifetime. That kind of, the government's going to stimulate the economy through spending money, borrowing money and spending it, is what we're going to do during the Depression to start getting us out of the Depression. And in fact, getting us out of the Depression happens because we get into World War One and we spend a whole bunch of money we don't have. We borrow it from the future. We borrow it so that we can continue the war, and everybody gets a job, and the economy bounces back, even in the middle of a war. Well, that was his idea. Um, they tried to sell this stuff to industrial workers too. Um, they did stuff like they supported labor unions' opposition to injunctions. What was happening is the labor unions would strike, and then a judge would come in and say, "You can't strike," and there'd be these injunctions, these things that judges would do to tell them to go back to work. And I will oppose that. We'll run a campaign and ask for 40-hour weeks and 5-day weeks and things like that. You only have to work a 5-day week, a 40-hour week, less hours during the day, 8-hour work day. Those are some of the things the populists did to try to sell their ideas to the industrial workers. It didn't really catch on. The ideas remain, but they didn't trust the populists to do it because free silver. So the big election in this, it really determined a lot of things, was the election of 1896. The populists have lost in 1892 fairly badly. William Jennings Bryan, their candidate, they feel like they have a better chance. Now, the weird thing about Bryant is the Democratic Party put him up as their candidate. And the populists have a choice. Do we put our own guy up who's destined to fail and kind of split the vote between the Democrats and us and guarantee the Republicans? Or do we kind of make ourselves less important by actually appointing William Jennings Bryan to be our candidate as well? So the Democrats and the Populist Party both appoint William Jennings Bryan to run against McKinley. Well, it helped perhaps, but it didn't help enough because McKinley's going to win. There was way too much money backing his candidacy, even though he sat on his back porch and campaigned and sent people out. There was a lot of money spent in this campaign to tell people about McKinley and how bad the ideas were of the populists. And basically, even though William Jennings Bryan went around to kind of a modern campaign where he went around to all these cities and spoke hundreds of times and met everybody he could, he just was never able to get out the message enough, or it wasn't appealing enough to enough people to elect him. So he's going to lose this election, and McKinley's going to become president. This really helped the Republicans. You can talk about specifically how they got all that money and so forth. It's kind of interesting. Basically, a large number of Southern white farmers refused to desert the Democratic Party and support the populists because of the history of racial division in the region. This starts making the Populist Party less and less popular. And in 1896, when McKinley wins, that really kind of knocks out the Populist Party. The Democratic Party is going to continue on, but this is an era from really McKinley on till the Depression, where Republican candidates are going to dominate politics in America. Most of the things you need to know about the Populist Party are actually, well, why are we even talking about it? A bunch of mad farmers, and they didn't even win the presidential election. Well, but they came up with a lot of ideas that actually survived, like progressive income taxes was one of theirs, like direct election of senators. Before that, the states legislatures elect senators. They said, well, no, the people should elect senators. Various other things we're going to talk about when we get into the progressives are actually ideas that start in the Populist Party. Now, one that didn't continue was the bimetallism. That one's going to fall apart, mainly because the need for it goes away. When you have new discoveries of gold around the world, in South Africa, in Alaska, in Colorado. We're going to find gold, and that allows the supply of gold in the world to go up. Well, that takes some pressure off. It allows for a little bit of expansion of prices and so forth. Also, some wars are going to, and prices are going to increase in farming, which helps as well. Some of the things they advocated for, like the bimetallism, the government taking over banks or railroads, really don't happen, at least the way they do in other countries. Like in European countries, a lot of them own the national bank. They own a national railroad. But in America, we don't do that. So some of the ideas don't, but some do. There's an influential party for a third party. And we've had a lot of influential third parties, but generally in our history, we've only had two major parties. And the reason for that is whenever a third party comes in and starts getting any kind of traction, popular, there's some ideas that party is putting forward that the other two are ignoring. Well, they're not stupid. They start seeing these ideas are causing this group to become popular. Usually one or two or both of the parties start adopting these ideas. This is why some of the ideas of the Populist Party continue on, even though the party itself dies. All right, there's only one set of classwork for Unit 5, and there's only one video that you've got to watch of me anyway. Got another one I want you to watch, especially the end of it on the Gilded Age. But make sure you get that classwork done and your test done. Enjoy this fairly easy unit. Have a good day.